Here I am, J.S. Chitra. Let me welcome you all to this exclusively Loyola Talk series interview featuring Father Francis X. Clooney, Parkman Professor of Divinity and Professor of Comparative Theology at Harvard Divinity Center. He is a prominent figure in the world of theology and religious studies. He has been visiting India for nearly 50 years now. His primary areas of Indological studies are theological commentorial writings in Tamil and Sanskrit about the tradition of Hindu faiths. With a profound understanding of interreligious dialogues and a keen insight into various traditions, Father Clooney has been a driving force in fostering harmony and understanding among diverse communities. As a distinguished professor and author, he has been contributing to academia and has made a lasting impact in the field of theology. Join us as we attempt at delving into the life and wisdom of this remarkable scholar and priest. We are into exploring his experiences, beliefs, and vision for a more interconnected world. We welcome you, Father.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your warm welcome, inviting me to be here today.
I would start by asking you, what sparked your interest in choosing this field of study, that is theology and spirituality, and how did it influence your career choice?
So when I was a young person, before coming to India, I was already interested in spirituality, theology, religion, and very much growing up as a practicing Catholic in New York City. So I think it was already part of my life when I was young. And then after my secondary education, I entered the seminary and I became a novice to become a Jesuit father, which would take 10 years. So I was on the track of learning, thinking as a spiritual person, wanting to become a father, and so on. But key was what happened, as you mentioned, 50 years ago this summer. So in July of 1973, I came to Kathmandu. I landed in Delhi, then flew to Kathmandu. And suddenly I began to realize that being a religious person could also mean being an interreligious person. And that learning from my own Catholic tradition could also be influenced in part by learning from the boys I was teaching, who were 100% Hindu and Buddhist, going around the ancient city of Kathmandu, learning from the people. So I suppose starting out with an expectation about religion and belief, then I developed it as a personal commitment, but then also said, let it open up globally, let it open up interreligiously as well.
Okay. So what theological concepts or spiritual traditions have significantly shaped your faith during your academic journey?
So again, the starting point, I think, is that I've grown up Roman Catholic in the Roman Catholic Church. And I think the Roman Catholic tradition, which is by no means perfect, and there are limitations to being Catholic, is nonetheless a great tradition that has in its own identity theology, philosophy, mysticism, spirituality, also the practice of religion. So Catholics, we don't just believe certain things, but we practice. We go to the church, we have festivals, we have devotions. All of that was part of my life. And as a Jesuit, I think one of the hallmark teachings that we were given by our founder, St. Ignatius, is finding God in all things. And that even if you are a staunch Catholic, a staunch believer, God is everywhere. And God is in your tradition, God is in the world around you, God is everywhere you go. So I think with that starting point, it was a beautiful harmony for me to start learning from Hindu and Buddhist traditions in Kathmandu. I mean, especially the Hindu traditions that I brought into the classroom. We started reading Bhagavad Gita, scenes from Ramayana, Mahabharata, and so on. A sense that God is everywhere. God is in religion, God is in the holy place, God is in the practice, but God is in the world around you. And that everywhere you go, there is a sense of God being there. So some kind of a harmony between the Catholic and the Hindu began to click for me. And I found that that was what I wanted to talk about, that God is not simply here or there, but God is here and there as well.
Okay. So, how do faith and reason intersect in your perspective as a theologian? And how do they complement each other in seeking truth?
Well, the simplest way to think about who we are as human beings is to realize that we are, you might say, both heads and hearts. And that to be a full human being, we're physical beings, we're living in the world, the real world around us. And yet we also have reasoning power. We can think, we can ask questions, we can disagree, we can read books and learn, we can learn from our neighbors and our friends, but also always wondering, does it mean anything to me in my heart? Does it mean anything spiritually? So I think some people may say reason or the heart, reason or mysticism. But I think I would say that it's both, and that we have traditions in India, certainly. Think of the great logical traditions like Nyaya, Mimamsa, even some Vedanta, that stress reasoning, Tarka, and other forms of reasoning that are very logical, very hard and very fast, as in the Greek world, in the Latin world, in the Catholic world. But also that these traditions also have a sense of the mystical, of the poetic, art and music, and asking the question, does your reasoning do you any good? One of the terms I learned, I think somewhere maybe in Mimamsa study early on, was Shuska Tarka. And Shuska Tarka means like dry reasoning. It's just reasoning that is dried out. It cannot feed you. It cannot nourish you. You're just thinking and talking, thinking and talking. So the ideal that I think is, you see in schools like Vedanta and Shaivism and Vaishnavism, and then in the West, is that your mind challenges your heart and your heart opens up your mind. We in the Catholic tradition have a sense theology is faith-seeking understanding. And faith, you might say, is a matter of the heart, the things we deeply believe, but seeking understanding, asking questions. So faith is the beginning of a journey. It's not, I now know all the answers, I'll have nothing more to say, but no, it's a lifelong quest. And so when I think of 50 years now, being Catholic, being a priest, being a Jesuit, and 50 years of experience of India, Hinduism, Kathmandu, that it's still a lifelong journey. That however many years I have left, I still have more questions, more things to think about. And those are questions of the mind, but they also open up my heart as well.
Okay. So again, based on your work in interreligious dialogue, can you discuss the importance of fostering understanding and cooperation among different faiths and their traditions in today's globalized world?
Well, I think if we look at the world around us, we have to be honest and say that in many cases, the world is not in good shape. We have environmental disasters, we have too many weapons, too many wars going on, we have great poverty in the world, and we have political situations that are oppressive, where people are being crushed by majorities, people are being threatened and frightened. So many, you see everywhere in the world, refugees, people fleeing their countries because of the violence and so on like that. So all these problems around us. And then sadly, in many cases, religion is used to make it worse. So religion itself doesn't make it worse, but cynical politicians, cynical leaders will start chanting slogans and talking about our religion versus your religion, and arguing that we need to fight one another religiously and we will win. And that seems to be anti-religion, anti-spirituality. So I think the contribution that I would see theology making, faith-seeking understanding making, learning as a scholar, and then for 40 years now I've been a teacher, so a teacher also, is to show that because faith and reason are not opposed to one another, because they go together, you have to be a believer, but you also have to know what you're talking about. And I think some of the fanaticism in today's world is people who chant holy names and claim to have religious visions and claim to be speaking of their great traditions. But if you ask them a question, they don't really know what they're talking about. And while it seems, we're not asking everyone to be a professor and everyone to be at the university, At least some sense when I say I believe in Jesus, or I believe in Ram, or I'm a follower of the Prophet Muhammad, to have some sense of knowing what does that actually mean, and where do you get your knowledge from? Is it from your family, which is good?
Mm-hmm.
Do you study the Bible, the Quran, Bhagavad Gita? That's good. But where is your knowledge coming from? And for people who only get their knowledge from YouTube or media, which can be rabble-rousing, that's not good. So some sense of knowing what you're talking about becomes extremely important. And if we know what we're talking about, that can cut back on fanaticism.
What, according to you, are the common misconceptions?
The list could go on for a long time, but some of the misconception is that life is a lifelong journey to experience God.